Have you ever wanted to learn how to paint but never knew where to start? Well, today I will show you how to create a beautiful painting effortlessly. Painting is a stress reliever and an easy outlet to be expressive. All you have to do is run to your local craft store and gather a few materials. I have always been intrigued by many forms of art such as cinematography, photography, fashion, painting, and sculpture, etc. Once I discovered that most of these can be self-taught, I tried it out for myself. However, I will admit that I wasn't that good until my high school teacher taught me how to hone in on my skills. To begin, you must gather the proper materials. At your local craft store, pick up some watercolor paper. If you want to test it out on regular paper, you may. However, the paper absorbs the water and it creates ripples. You want to grab watercolor paper because it specifically has dips, so it won't create the ripples. Next, grab some paintbrushes with a variety of sizes. Doesn't matter what size. Small ones are for detailing and the big ones are for a bigger picture. You will need a mixing palette for your paint, a graphite pencil, an eraser, a pen, which is optional, but it's for detailing. And for paint, you can either grab watercolor tubes or you can get dried out paint. Personally, I like dried out paint because it's easier to control and mix. You will also need water to dip your paintbrushes in and clean them out as you work. Once you have gathered all of your materials, it is time to move on to the next step. Second, you will begin to sketch your painting. This is an optional step, however, if you're a beginner, you should map out your vision. Take a pencil and lightly draw an outline and work into the details, such as the shadows and the lighter spots. The shadows are where you want your darker spots to be, and leave a space open to where you want your white spots to be. This is important because when you begin painting, you can't erase paint. Now that you are prepared, you may begin painting. There are two ways to paint with watercolor, which is wet on wet and wet on dry. Wet on wet is when you take your paintbrush and wet the paper before you begin painting with color. Next, you activate your watercolor and slowly saturate the water that is already on the paper. This allows your colors to blend easily, especially if you're mixing colors. Wet on dry is simply wetting the paint and going straight to the paper. This creates a more saturated look with your paint. If you are trying to create a gradient look and not so harsh when you are doing this technique, take some water and drag it down. Don't add more paint, just only water. And it'll become lighter as you go. An important thing to remember is the less water you have, the easier it is to control. So if you do wet on wet, don't saturate your paper with water because it'll go everywhere. Now that you have sketched out your painting, choose your colors and mix it on your mixing palette. I forgot to mention you need a paper towel to dab out the excess paint and water so you can change colors. If you sketch the drawing, make sure you erase most of the harsh lines. A sketch should only be an outline for what you want to do as a guide. However, watercolor is too transparent, so you may be able to see your sketching and you don't want that. Typically, when I begin painting, I like to utilize both techniques, wet on wet and wet on dry. I use wet on wet first to begin painting and get my color in there. And then whenever I want to make it darker and saturated, I go wet on dry. It's also important to let your layers dry as you're painting. You don't want to layer while it's still wet because it's just going to spill and may even leave your sketch. After laying and creating smooth transitions, you are now finished. Another optional step you can do is outline your painting with a black ballpoint pen, or you can leave it as is. I like as is more. In conclusion, painting is indeed simple and relaxing. All you have to do is 3 simple steps: gather your materials, sketch what you want to create, and paint away. Congratulations, you have passed the beginner level. Now you are able to let your creativity flourish.